Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian, that's Rob. It is the first week off in the summer break, and I miss F.
Yeah, I do. I do, apart from when the only news to report, oh my God, is renaming of teams. Before we get in there, let's do the normal shakedown, shall we? So, news and social featuring the new name for AlphaTauri, and some other bits and pieces we found. Brian will use his new epic sound effects to open and close the video vault. We have the big countdown to the T-shirt winner in fantasy. And then, if that wasn't enough, we have a chat with the other half of Missed Apex Trumpets. Now, saying half because I mean founders. I'm not ignoring any of the other hosts they have on there. Okay, so
You've done that before with other podcasts.
I did it before with Molly, and it still haunts me to this day. So I'm talking founders here. So yeah, we had. Wow, we booked it thinking it was going to be like a 30-minute chat. I think it's the best part of 55 minutes. And we carried on afterwards, after we'd stopped recording. We went on for another 35 minutes with him. He's just a pleasure to speak to. Hope you enjoy it when we get to that part.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for doing that.
Right.
So your favorite one, talk about AlphaTauri.
I can't say this properly. I've tried really hard. So it's AlphaTauri is going to get rebranded to, I'll try this now, Hugo Boss Bulls Racing, and keep saying Hugo Boss Bulls Racing. I mean, it's just Hugo Boss Bulls Racing as far as I'm concerned, because I can't pronounce it properly when I say it.
Hugo Boss Bulls Racing. If that actually is the name, that is the worst name I've ever heard. But I would like to give a shout out to @forward/F1 or FW/F1 Twitter, who gone back and forth with for a while. Came out with the name. What about Toro Bosso? How good is that name?
That is chef's kiss.
I mean, from now on, if they go Hugo Boss, they are now Toro Bosso forever. Yeah. And then he said, or she said, I don't know, said someone else had already said they did it, and he didn't seem like they're following. Whatever. That's not their MO. So @forward/F1, follow them.
First time I saw it, anyway. So as far as I'm concerned, they created it and trademarked it and patented it, and there should be a T-shirt out. If they do actually come up with that as a name, then I want a Toro Bosso T-shirt.
Heck yeah.
Then I wanted to make sure we hadn't missed this in the Belgian roundup, because it happened last week in Spa, but it looks like a lot of the news carriers didn't kind of break it till Monday, Tuesday. So I'm going to let us off here for not picking it up, Ryan. But you know me with names. Okay, I'm going to try it. Sophia Flourish? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Female German racer, races for the PHM racing team, and she became the first female to score points in Formula 3.
Amazing.
Which is amazing. Now so she qualified 21st for the F3 Grand Prix and finished 7th. Took 6 points. Now, technically, she'd already done it at Spielberg at the beginning of July, but good old disqualification, a bit like probably Seb and his lack of fuel sample, meant that was taken away from her. But fair play, come back and has got it. And there was a number of different tweets that kind of, shouted her out for it. And I think it was good old Jean Todt, old Ferrari dude.
Just got married, right?
So
didn't Jean Todt just get married?
Didn't invite me to the wedding, so I'm not.
It was like he had a record, like 18-year engagement or something. His wife's an actress. I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, the story wasn't about him, but you do what you want, Brian.
It did. Well, congratulations to Sophia and to Jean Todt and his spouse. Don't know their name either. All right. So one other big piece of news, and this is actually, I had to take the chopper to report live. Reporting live over the Department of No Beep Department. This is my favorite news story that everyone in the world already knew. Pirelli Formula One boss Mario Isola says he agrees with George Russell's suggestion that the full wet tire is now pointless. Where have you been, Mario? We've been saying this for some time now. Because of Belgian and the Belgian GP and Spa and the way that the wet was used behind the safety car, and then everyone came in one at a time, so 2 laps, each team pitted one at a time to get off the wets onto the inters. no one uses the wet tire in actual racing anymore. And there's a lot of reasons. But basically, it's being dubbed the safety car tire. And we have said this. Rob was on this even before me, but we've said this for a long time. And Isola does say, tells the media, including Racing News 365, we have to divide two problems. One is the visibility, one is the performance of the wire. Agreed. We have said this before. We know these are the problems. And so he said, we tested the wet tire. This version is about 5 to 6 seconds a lap better than the old wet tire when they tested it at Fiorano and Paul Ricard. Well, there's part of the problem. They tested hard, but that's okay. I'm going to let that one slide for a second. But the visibility is a problem, and the FIA and the teams are apparently working on some devices that can ability by reducing spray that is coming not only from the tires, but also the diffuser. I don't know if they've heard of mud flaps. Those work here on trucks in the United States. So I know that's...
Yeah,
I'm
but
kidding,
how many highways?
I'm kidding. It's not mud
How many
flaps.
highways have you driven down and seen bits of truck on the side of the road? Those mud flaps, if they put those on the back of Formula One cars doing 200 miles an hour.
They're not going to work. But anyway, that was news. And I'm like, how is that news? We all knew this, and we knew the two problems. I appreciate Pirelli understanding the fact that there are two problems to it, both the visibility in the wet and how they can solve these things.
One thing that I think when we kind of had a chat about this, which is rare for me, wanting to get involved in a chat on tyres, but the wet and the intermediate just seem too far apart. It just, I'm not a tyre engineer by any great shakes, but surely... I'm not, apparently.
I thought you were this whole time.
The deeper the tread gets, or the more water it can cut through and clear, right?
Yeah.
And the slower the tire gets. So you've got this wet tire, which looks like something you would probably put on an SUV. The deep tread you see on that is your classic tire. The intermediate looks like one that you've let run on your car for too long and it's never going to pass a test because it's almost going to slicks.
Yeah.
There seems to be a huge void in the middle where you could just have one in between. Or, like you said, get rid of the blue tire as it is and move it more towards the intermediate. Acknowledge that you're never going to race in the conditions anyway. So just bring a tire that has got a much better crossover point to the inters.
Or figure out a way to fix the spray. Right? I mean,
that's a separate... Yeah, I know,
but if you could fix the spray, the visibility would be better, and then maybe it's neat. But again, I don't know. I agree with you, though. That was a burger of news. And the last piece, before we get to the video vault, I just wanted to highlight something that tickled me. At Drinks No Tea, David Coulson on Twitter said, "This is my favorite F1 pod." Just tweeted out randomly a note, and that was awesome. I'm not saying I'm going to give every shout out every time someone says it's their favorite on podcast, but I will until someone stops. And so just
to be clear, that was our podcast he was tweeting about, not any other podcast.
Correct. The dirty side of the track, our podcast. All right, it is time to open the video vault because there were some good videos this week. Rob had some acting on top of that. Those on YouTube could enjoy watching that.
Acting lessons I took. That was
they paid off.
Plays. That
spent a lot of money on that one. So I'll do two of these and then Rob added one, and we both saw ones I'm going to highlight. Lollipop Man. Lollipop Man deserves some kind of award. I don't know from who and for what, but some kind of Formula One comedy video award should be created just for Lollipop Man. The Belgian GP video I thought was epic. It's a couple 3 minutes long. You have to go check it out. It is some of their best work. It couldn't have been any better. And I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but I loved it.
No, I'm going to give away one spoiler actually. Yeah. I am. I just think I wrote a comment on YouTube on one a few weeks back where I said that I don't understand how you keep making these better because this is your best one yet. Then there was one like last week maybe that was a bit of it was all right, but it wasn't amazing. And then this one hits, which again just raises the bar again. And I think I'm right in saying this, and someone can shoot me down if I'm wrong. It's the first time they've animated a car.
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
So as far as I can remember, I haven't seen a car.
I don't think I've ever seen a car. Half the joke is that it's always them running around the track instead. So there's never been the car. It's a Formula One comic absent of cars, which is kind of what makes it funny. But there's a car in this one. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, excellent. And then the other one that I saw and Rob saw as well was Grill the Grid on the F1 channel. Always fun to watch these, right? Always fun when they get the drivers together. And they had to name race winners with last names A through Z or
Z.
Or surnames through Alpha through Z or whatever you'd say. But here in America, we'd call it A to Z. And It was great, and you could see the drivers hemming and hawing. And I'm sitting on the couch, the luxury of being not on camera, watching it in front of my television, yelling names out there like Sebastian Vettel, and I'm like, and it's just you're watching people struggle. And even with people currently on the grid, like
that was some of my favorites.
Someone on the grid, they're like, huh? I'm like, Pierre Gasly. And so, it's one of those things.
Don't ruin too many of them.
I'm
Brian,
done. But it was great. I mean, I thought it was amazing. Did you enjoy it, Rob?
Well, I clicked onto it, and I clicked onto it from an Instagram short. So I saw kind of like them tease just the H letter. So the reel they put on Instagram was just most of them kind of naming Hamilton. So I thought, okay, that's got my interest. I'll go and have a look at it on YouTube. And I saw it was like 14 minutes long. I was like, this isn't going to keep me going for 14 minutes. I loved it. And it didn't feel like 14 minutes watching it. And just like you say, some of them, especially the real obvious ones where there's a ridiculous letter that you're just screaming at them, like, won't give it away. On some of them, it's their teammate. And they can't think of somebody with that last name. And I will spoil one letter. The one letter that I think almost everybody got within a nanosecond was S, and it was kind of split down the middle between Schumacher and Senna.
Yes.
There might have been one or two passes in there. I mean, we won't give away the leaderboard, but let's just say that a couple of the drivers really don't know either anything about their own sport or crumble under pressure with cameras in their faces.
The
at
camera
least
thing
two
I
of
think
them
was part of it. Honestly,
okay, we'll give them that maybe.
But yeah, a couple of them scored very poorly. We won't give the leaderboard, but there were 2 or 3 drivers who impressed. I will say this. Now, this was one of those situations where I'm thinking, too bad Seb's not on the grid, and it went 100%. Like he would have come up with drivers who had won a race whose name we didn't even know. Like, I mean, he's so good at the history. We miss Seb. I miss you,
Well,
Seb.
You see, didn't he name every single winner from 1950 through to
I watched
2022
that. I watched that
in
many
order?
times.
And
backwards. Backwards.
And then
last one, please.
the last one I found, I don't know it's on YouTube yet. Again, I clicked on the Haas channel to see if they'd moved it across, but they hadn't. So I've just got a link to the Instagram reel, which is only 45 seconds long. But it's K-Mag and Hulkenberg playing a game where you put a fork, lay a fork flat down on a table, so the tines are pointing down into the table, and then try and roll a coin the length of the table and have it come to rest in a slot. Looks the most infuriating game to play. I'm going to have to give it a go as well. But oh my gosh.
I haven't seen this one.
2 sports people that are competitive, and it starts off as a bit of fun. They're rolling it. Oh yeah, funny, I miss. I'll try again. By the end, it's kind of like you can see the anger starting to swell. And then I won't say who gets it. Actually, the same driver gets it twice, I think, in this reel, and one of them doesn't get it at all. But it just made me laugh, and it's 45 seconds long, so why not?
Amazing. We'll have to get... And that closes the video vault. Fantastic. So, moving on, because we have to get to Matt Trumpets. Fantasy. Fantasy, we have the results of the first half of the year, the Belgian GP. We have some answers on who won the first T-shirt. But before we do, I have an apology. I'd like to apologize to Matt from Canada, who sent his team name I hosed up royally last week when he made the top, and I called it, would have been Hungary, and I called it Tsunoda #Perez #Max, because it's TSU #PER and so I literally read it out because I'm so bad at names, and he said, no, it's Super Max. It's Super Max. Max, Super, Max, Super, Max, Super. You, Matt?
Please stop singing and never do it again.
I'm done. And so I apologize for that, hosing that up. I do notice, Matt, though, that I don't think you made the Belgium. Neither did I, though. So that's good. Let's look at the top 10 for the Belgian GP. Number 1, Don't Be a Wet Horner. Tails, I Win. Potenza Racing. Aston Farton. My Brain Choice. Mick Lapham tied with at F1 Fantasy Hub and Much Mistaken. In 9th, Chicago Gooner. And then 10th, Clean Racing Not Possible. I am proud to say I got off my 55th situation in Hungary and moved all the way up to 45th in Spa. My overall standing is dented beyond belief. My pride is non-existent. My talent, oh boy, my talent is missing. My talent is, as Lando would say,
it's broken. It's broken.
I don't know how to fix it. Tried. Rob, how do you do? Did you watch your results for the Belgian GP?
No, because I'd gone all in on McLaren, and I'd gone Oscar and Lando after the first corner incident. I was like, oh well, that's that done, isn't it? So I imagine that somewhere not too far away from your points because I think we're pretty
think we have a
similar
pretty
for the
similar
rest
team,
of it.
yeah.
So, yeah, I got Red Bull, Alonso, 2 McLaren boys. It escapes me. Valtteri, I think I've got in there as well. So, yeah, not a fantastic week, I imagine. But anyway, we need to find out, Brian. I'm here, literally sitting on the edge of my seat, despite the fact I'm at a standing desk. That's how excited I am. I'm standing while on the edge of my seat as to who won the T-shirt in the first half.
And so in 10th place, Tails I Win. I think that's E. 9th place, F1 Fantasy Hub. That's definitely who's been on. 7th place, Potenza Racing tied with Lord William II. Good job. 5th place tie, FPL Instinctive and Crash Team Racing 1. 4th, McLapham. 3rd, Michael Cronhay 16. 2nd place, Vincendez 1. And the winner of the T-shirt for the first half is Much Mistaken with 3,699 points. Well done to Much Mistaken. Now, because the game has done such a good job of not sharing any information about anything, we have no idea who Much Mistaken is. We have their name. We don't. So if you, Much Mistaken, could email in to dirtysideofthetrack@gmail.com, like maybe a screenshot of your team so we know it's your team, and your info, we'll send you a team, because congratulations, you won the first half. And I have one more thing, Rob, before we leave fantasy. I got to bring this up. A friend of mine texted me an idea. He's a gambling and fantasy-aholic. And it's an idea. And if you hate it, we'll move on from it. We're going to do this live over the pod to see what about, and it's my friend Mark's idea. It's not mine. I can't claim credit. What about an F1 Survivor game where each week, because there are 10 weeks left, you pick 2 drivers. 10 times 2 is 20. You can only use them once, so it's a knockout game. Refer does other things. You have to pick a winning driver and a losing driver. And if your winning driver finishes ahead of your losing driver, you get to move on. If you're wrong, And so we see who's left standing at the end of 10 weeks, or whomever makes it the furthest, but we may not make it that far. And so it's a manual deal. I'm happy to facilitate this on Discord if it's worth anything. If you don't, I won't. But it's basically you pick a winning and losing driver, can't use them again. And if you get it right, you move on to the next week. And there's 10 races left. It's a perfect time. What do you think about the F1 Survivor game?
So you're going to fully administer this and I don't have to do anything?
Yeah. I'll do it on Discord, though. So people would have to join Discord to do this, to submit their picks. And then I'll make a section of the Discord for the Survivor game. And then we'll I'll pay for a T-shirt for the winner of this too.
Oh wow! I mean, the moment now that you're paying and B, you're doing all the admin. I mean, what's not to love?
So this is a great idea by Mark. So if anyone's interested, Rob will have in the show notes a link to our Discord. It's on our webpage as well, www.dirtysideofthetrack.com, for those of you listening to us on radio. Check it out. Join the Discord. We will start the fantasy game when the season starts August. And it'll be Fantasy Survivor, a winner, a loser. And the one thing I'll say, though, the one harsh part...
Oh, my gosh. Come on. People are waiting for Matt Trumpets.
The
what
harsh
are you
part
doing?
is if anyone does not finish, you lose. That's just, I couldn't figure out any other way around it. You don't get to start over. You don't get to keep going. It's not fair to the people who got it right. A DNF, you're done. So bad luck. All right, back to you, Rob.
Okay, so as we mentioned last week, and as we said at the beginning of this show, we had a chat with Matt Trumpets this week. So I'm not going to beat around the bush. Let's have a listen in, see how we got on talking to Matt.
Box.
Okay, for anyone who's been listening to us for a while, you would have heard back at the beginning of the year we had Spanners on from the Mr. Apex podcast, which both Brian and I listened to. And I'm thrilled to say that we have, according to the Mr. Apex site anyway, the other co-creator, we'll dig into that in a little bit in a second, but Matt Trumpets, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track.
The quietly better one.
Welcome, Matt. It's great to have you here.
Thanks. It's awesome to be here.
It's amazing to have someone on with an American accent. I just appreciate that. So where are you located in the U.S.? I'm assuming you're in the U.S.
I am in the city of New York, specifically in Brooklyn, where I've been for some umpteen years now.
That is excellent.
Yeah, and you've been there umpteen years mainly as a musician, correct?
Yes. Well, in the larger environs of New York City, I've been here for quite some time. I actually moved here in 1987. And I was at least a year old when that happened, but I'm not going to say exactly how many more than 1 year old I was, because even 87 start to look like a long time ago.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, I wasn't alive back then, so I can only imagine. I've read it in the history books, but Yeah. Although I was extremely disappointed when I saw you logging in, to realize for the very first time that your last name actually isn't Trumpets, but because I just thought, what an amazing epiphany to have your last name named after trumpets and then gone to be a trumpet player extraordinaire. So I'm kind of crushed right now, but I think I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. That was a name that actually Spanners gifted to me on our very, very first meeting, which wasn't on Zoom, but was on Skype. Because of my internet nom de guerre and my email address. He just assumed my name was Matt Trumpets, and it never really occurred to him that that's a pretty unusual surname for anyone to have. So he just called me Matt Trumpets, and, as you said, being a trumpet player, I was perfectly fine with that because I grew up on the internet where you weren't supposed to use your last name, so it kind of worked out.
I wish I had kind of had the same thought, because I would have realized I was doing a podcast with Rob. I hate DRS, but that's not actually his last name, it turns out.
And just before we kind of get into digging into kind of your past, we do have to try to say that we are 100% not trying to rip off the Missed Apex format here with a Brit and a US based guy going.
No, that's fine. It's all what do you call it? Not a tribute. It's all coming from a good place, so I love it.
So let's dig into it. I'm going to make a huge assumption here that your love of F1 became before deciding to start Missed Apex podcast with Spanners, because that would be really weird to start a podcast about something you knew nothing about. So when did you first kind of get into motorsport? Was it F1 from the beginning? Was it another variety? What kind of perked your interest first, Matt?
Okay, so there's 3 legs to this story.
Ooh.
The first leg goes back to the days of yore, when there were only 3 channels and you had to get up off the couch if you wanted to watch a different one. And I became interested in motorsports and racing because if you watched any sports, you had to put on the channel, and the sports were on from 2 to 5 on or like 12 to 5 on Saturday and 2 to 5 on Sunday. And you watched what they put on the TV for you. And occasionally you got Olympics if you were lucky. And one of the things they played a lot was IndyCar. And I became interested in it, got interested in Mario Andretti. And as the years went by and he moved to F1, I consumed some of that too. But that was all young me, not barely high school me. I came to New York, and here's where it takes an interesting turn. I became a competitive cyclist, like a road cyclist, like Tour de France cycling.
Wow. Yeah.
And I competed, long story how I got there, but I competed for several seasons as a licensed amateur. Traveled up and down the East Coast, did stage races, criteriums. I raced in the velodrome. I was category 3 when I officially retired by not continuing to race. Mostly because my music career got to a point where it was sort of one or the other. And of the two, I was making a lot more money at music than I was at racing bicycles. Go figure. And as a result of that, I had gotten very interested in the Tour de France, which you had to read about in Velo News. Is the only way to find out about it, until they put it on ESPN2. And this is where my Formula One story starts, because the first year was like 96, 97. I don't remember what it was. And they said, we're putting the tour on. And I was so excited to see it happen with my own eyes, because it's hard for people now to understand, because you can pretty much, if you have a will and, a reasonable technical know-how, you can watch pretty much anything from anywhere, anytime you want, and not even necessarily have to pay for it. But back then it was much, much harder. It had to be on cable TV, computers, what are even those? We don't know. And they put it on, and I was so excited. And they put it on at like 2:00 in the morning, like a little half-hour stage thing. But what happened was, either right before or right after was when they had their Formula One on. So I began watching Formula One, not because I wanted to, not even because I was really that interested in it, because, I had lots popping back then, but mostly because it was on afterwards. And like, you watch an exciting stage, and then like you're awake, there's adrenaline. Oh, look, here's 90 minutes of people refueling at different times. How exciting is that? And here's 90 minutes of Michael Schumacher winning by 72 laps. How exciting is that? It's just something to fall asleep to. And then I moved, things changed, and it was all good until I watched a Top Gear episode in about 2006 or 2007 with a driver you may have heard of on it, Lewis Hamilton.
I remember this episode.
And he said, and I remember the thing that got me, like, he was fast, but I know like the F1 drivers in slow cars is probably a rigged test anyway. But his response to crashing, like, well, you know, like it was kind of fun. I was like, okay, this is clearly someone I want to see on a track at some point because they have an interesting take towards life. And I mostly forgot about it. And occasionally I might catch a little piece of a race on Speed or Discovery or whatever channel they were putting them on. And I remember seeing going into 2008 that he was, you know, in the championship hunt. This is like with 3 races to go. Like it got mentioned on Top Gear, which was funny enough. My wife would watch it with me, just to be clear. The only reason I got to watch that. And I thought to myself, well, you know, I went through a whole thing of watching the tour with the wife, and I need a sort of an obscure niche European sport to watch because now cycling is kind of popular here and everyone talks about it. And that's just not me at all. And I was like, oh yeah, Formula One. So let me tune in. Let me see what's happening, Formula One. And then, of course, I forget about it because that's also me until I'm like breezing through the channels and I'm like, and I see in the guide, oh, Formula One, Brazil. Let me put that on. And I happened to put it on about 5 laps from the end of the race in 2008, kind of hoping Lewis Hamilton would win. And having a general, and I tune in, they're like, if he doesn't pass so-and-so, Massa wins the champion. And I missed like all the other stuff, the fires and the stupidity. And I was just like, and I watched those last laps and that was it. I was done. And next season I started watching again and I just got more and more into it basically from that point on.
How did Not a bad last 5 laps to have tuned into, to be honest. I mean,
it was pretty lucky.
It still does break my heart thinking of Massa and his family celebrating up until the last corner of the last lap. But, you know, c'est la vie. But, yeah. Sorry, go on, Brian. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, so then how did you find it after that? As an F1 fan in America, it was around the time when I kind of came back to it. Mm-hmm. My origin story, not important, but similar in terms of you get hooked and then I fell away from it and I came back. And so it was around then when I kind of started tuning in a little more often and a little more regularly, but it was still like you said it was this weird European thing. It was like a secret handshake club. Whenever I ran into somebody who also knew what F1 even was a surprise for me for quite some time. And did you find people to watch with or talk about it with, or was it just something you enjoyed, after watching some Top Gear?
Well, it was, I didn't follow it religiously. I wasn't like every second, every practice session, but I would run across people randomly. Like I met a guy playing pitch and putt golf one time who he had, what was the car? I can't remember, the V8 fast car. And I asked him about that, and it turns out he was a Formula One fan. He was a Kimi Räikkönen fan because when he got into it, Räikkönen was the guy on the scene. It was like 2003, 2004, 2005 when he was winning everything and just a complete breath of fresh air. I guess 03 was like Alonso, but Räikkönen was the fresh voice on the scene, and he was totally taken by Räikkönen. He's a big Kimi Räikkönen fan. I was like, oh, I don't know, I don't see it, but I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan, and of course, Lewis was the breath of fresh air on the scene when I started watching, and I think you get that same dynamic with people who are Max fans and people who are Norris fans. Is they're the breath of fresh air when I happen to get interested, and then you're just like, like a baby bird. You're just like imprinted on that driver for the length of their career.
Yeah. It still gets me though, like to run into another F1 fan in the wild. I know it's night and day, and especially in America and after Drive to Survive. I'm not making this up. I was at the gym 2 days ago, and when I go to the gym, I don't talk to anybody. I don't want to be that guy. Just leave me alone. Let me do my thing. I'll get out of here. I don't I'm not bothering a soul. I'm just doing my thing. But a guy walks in with a Lando Norris shirt on, and I couldn't contain myself. I walked up, I went, Lando Norris, good luck this weekend, and I mean, like, for some reason, it's still so exciting to me to find another here in America F1 fan in the wild, even though it's not as rare as it used to be. But interesting. So then, sorry, if I could ask another follow-up question to that. And Rob, I think we're kind of getting to this point. How did you then take that joy and that, the watching Lewis Hamilton and kind of getting into watching him in Brazil? How did that turn into Missed Apex and your participation there?
Oh, I thought you were going to say ruin it with a unhealthy addiction to the minutia of Formula One engineering.
We'll get to that. Don't worry. Because that's one of the traits that always that you bring to the table on all the episodes that I know Spanners absolutely loves. So we have to dive into that at some point.
Yeah.
No, how does it come about? How do you guys meet and decide to start the podcast?
Okay, so how did we meet? And how do we how did we decide to do the podcast? Well, we met through another website that I won't name, but for whom I had been doing some writing because I happened to write a particularly trenchant comment about the illegal Mercedes tire test the day they were litigating it. They said, "Would you write for us?" And I said, "Yes." And I wrote for them. And then they said, "We're going to have a podcast." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure, whatever." I got a SM57 and a computer. And then I was on the podcast and I wrote up the notes, and Spanners had been brought on to host the podcast. So that's where we met. And that went on for a while, and then it fell apart, as many things in life do. And he went his separate ways, but we stayed in touch. We started another podcast that had nothing whatsoever to do with Formula One for a while. And then eventually we figured, the gardening leave was over. And he said, "Look, I want to start a Formula One podcast, but I only want to do it if you're willing to be on it too." And I, of course, had a daughter to raise and a wife. And I was like, well, really, I've got nothing better to do. Let's spend endless hours of our lives talking about Formula One and ignoring our families.
Welcome to the club.
So that was it. And then, because you've been going it's over a decade now, isn't it? Is it basically just over 10 years old?
Yeah. I think Missed Apex is right around its 10th anniversary.
Yeah,
as a podcast.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. We haven't quite got to the end of season 2 yet, and I can already appreciate the amount of ridiculous hard work that must have gone into keeping that thing going, because after the first buzz of maybe the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 episodes where you're like, yeah, we're doing this, like the keeping it going the amount of times you guys have is just insane. But I found you guys actually, when I moved to the US 6.5 years ago, I kind of fell into this. I'd have no exposure of this secret handshake club, because for me, F1 in the UK, well, that's something everyone talks about. My first sport is football. I won't call it soccer, Brian. And then the second one was Formula One, and it was just easy to see on TV, to read about it, to chat to friends about it. And then I kind of moved here, and suddenly I was plunged into this. Literally, no one knows what this sport is. So I kind of started hunting around to listen to people that might know what they were talking about, and that's kind of when I stumbled across you guys and started listening to your lot. So you were kind of my little sanctuary of like other people that know about Formula One, but I can't go and talk to anybody about it. So thank you very much for doing that.
Well, yeah, and I think we were talking a little bit, and it was always where we wanted to be with the show was like, we want to talk about what you would talk about with your friends at the pub after the race. Yeah. We made a conscious decision very early on to not do like a lap by lap tortuous reconstruction of everything that happened in the race. So that's part of the challenge of doing the show, but I think that's also part of the beauty of it, is it invites listeners into the conversation, because you're sat there listening as part of that we want you to feel like you're there in a bar with us, and yes, we're wrong, and you want to yell at us a lot and tell us why.
Yeah, that's kind of, Brian and I, we won't go into our origin story with you, but it's very, very similar in terms of that whole idea of like, you kind of want the people listening to be the third bar stool at the bar with you guys. And for us, it's me, Brian, and anyone who wants to listen, whether it's one person or whether it's 10. That's how you want it to feel, right? So that's cool. And it was great when we had Spanners on. We've been lucky enough to have Antonio on as well. So you guys are going great guns.
So I see where I rank here. Okay.
In the UK, we have the phrase "save the best till last."
That phrase works here too.
I'm never quite sure. I sometimes throw these things out, Brian. You look at me like I've just said something completely random. And so I always have to check myself at the moment with any kind of slang. So, anyway, you throw me now.
Well, Matt, I guess, kind of shifting from the start of Missed Apex and kind of how you kept it going to, let's talk a little bit about this year, if we could. I'd love to get your thoughts as you guys have been covering the season and as you watch the season. I guess I'm curious, do you think Max will win the championship or not? No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke.
It's really, mathematically speaking. Sorry, I'm joking. Like, there's.
I'm going to jump on the back of that question, actually, because obviously it was a stupid question. But say, one of the big debates going on at the moment, right, is have the new regulations worked in creating closer racing? Now, are we looking at, if you put the anomaly that is Max over there in a corner, are we feeling that the rest of the field has closed up and we get to enjoy best of the rest battles, or have the new regs screwed up? What's kind of your view on where we are right now with the F1 regs?
Okay, so I would say that last season, the stated goal of the regulations to allow for a closer following, completely 100% there. This season, it's already going away a lot because the regulations are not as effective as, well, the teams are just that much more clever, if I'm being honest. And when I say clever, I don't mean clever. What I mean simply is that the FIA had like 3 or 5 people work out these regulations, and each team has like hundreds of engineers trying to defeat them. It's not really anything that I would think of as a fair contest. What I would say is, looking at the times, and again, as you say, if we just were to simply remove Max from the equation, I don't think you could find an era of Formula One where the top 10 are as close as they are this season. There are some issues, like I said, with the following and the DRS trains. There can always be a better. But in the very broadest sense, the regulations succeeded generally at what they'd hoped for. Whether they'll last to the next regulations without it reverting to what it was prior, well, that kind of very much remains to be seen, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm not technical enough, so we're going to maybe dive into your technical expertise here. But one of the things that a lot of people pointed the finger at this year was to avoid the porpoising, the technical directive to raise the ride height, which kind of helped get rid of porpoising, but we've lost a bit of the ground effect, which means maybe we've lost a little bit of the close following. Now, way back when in the day, I think I'm right to say we used to have active suspension, which would probably negate this, but it got, I think, thrown away many, many years ago when they decided to get rid of all driver aids. Would you see that as being something that could be a decent solution to be brought back? Not traction control and all the other crap, but maybe just the active suspension to allow us to get maximized ground effect without the porpoising?
It was actually part of the discussion, I believe, for this regulation set, and is being looked at in terms of active aero for the next regulation set. But what really that was simply active ride height control. And the classic example of that is the Frank Williams's 93-94B, I think, which is, you can go find the clip on YouTube, and the car looks like it's doing a little dance as they run it through all of its full motion. And what they would do is they could literally program every inch of the track into it so that it was at the absolute perfect ride height for maximum aerodynamic efficiency. And if a driver is having a problem, they could fix it. And they ditched it, not because they wanted to get rid of all driver aids, but because there were a couple of very bad crashes when it went wrong. And it was expensive. Mm-hmm. And the combination of those two things had them chuck it out the window. Also, 94, they in general led to a great deal of rethinking about everything, corner speeds and all that sort of stuff. And in terms of safety, obviously a failure like that, active aero going wrong, you're very high speed, and there's not much the driver can do. And the crashes, they had way less safety features back then than we have now on cars. Was it a solution? Potentially, yeah. Did we need to raise the I forget, was it the diffuser and the floor edges by the 15 mil or whatever it was? The throat, I think, got raised. Well, maybe not. I mean, the teams had mostly solved this problem by last season. And essentially, every time you make any change, you sort of open the door for, if you look at any regulation change that I can think of off the top of my head, what you do is you open the door for one team to be way better than all the others, and then you spend a random amount of time hoping that somebody catches up. And we saw it certainly in 2014 with Mercedes. We saw it with Red Bull and their diffuser after the era when Braun had his runaway single season win. So, we really are in the modern era suffering from an unusual amount of single team dominance. And I think there's a lot of factors that lead to that. The good news is, aside from Max and the Red Bull, it's all quite close. And we see teams making larger steps relative to, if we say, how far off a Red Bull, how far off Max are you? We see teams making huge steps that I don't recall anyone making except for Ferrari when they had that engine that wasn't illegal, but somehow had to be removed through some agreement that we don't know anything about. And then they sucked eggs the following season. I don't recall like Aston showing up and like that kind of a breakthrough. Oh, geez. I don't recall seeing it. McLaren.
Yeah.
Same thing showing up. So I have hope that the regs have been simplified enough that we won't have to go to 2026 before some other team that's not Red Bull dominates the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, agree. I mean, I don't know. I don't like the people that decide to say that it's just the car, because to me that totally undermines Max's driving capability. I think right now we just have to admit that we're just seeing the absolute perfect blend of amazing driver with absolutely amazing car. And I've almost got to the point now where, because it's a done deal that he's going to win the title, I'm all in on let him win as much as he can and let's have history made in front of our eyes now. Let him win the rest of them. I've kind of got into that mentality now, because the title's done and dusted. So we might as well just see history be made.
See, I'm the opposite. I mean, I appreciate that, and I agree that he's going to obviously win. But I'm waiting to see who's best of the rest. I cheer for who's top of that pile, and then every single time I hope somebody can reach up and grab his boot and pull him down by the end of the year and beat him on track. Not like what happened in Baku with the VSC to safety car, which cost him the win. He would have won otherwise. I'm waiting for someone to beat him on track, and I will remain ever the F1 optimist that we'll see it sooner than later, even though it probably ain't going to happen anytime too soon. But what about you, Matt? Are you in Rob's camp? It's inevitable. He's won. Let's cheer him on for history. Or are you in the someone? Let's cheer on the next person to go grab him and keep hope alive until it happens.
I'm going to be exceedingly annoyed if he wins. Like if Red Bull win every race this season, I'm going to be highly irritated, because in sheer terms of dominance, the 88 McLaren was the most dominant car we've ever seen by loads more than this Red Bull. And even they couldn't win every single race thanks to a particularly hapless back marker. And if they couldn't do it with a car that dominant, and Red Bull does it with a car way less dominant, then I'm just going to be highly annoyed, because it shouldn't mathematically work out that way. You know what I mean?
Yes.
What that says to me is that the opponents of Red Bull have done an even worse job, relatively speaking, than the opponents of McLaren back then did. And that shouldn't be the case in this modern era at all.
So just backing into my previous thing about the car and driver combo, everyone's saying this Red Bull is that dominant. So Checo's not really making it look like it is he? Is he just doing a really terrible job? Is Max doing an amazing job, or is the answer somewhere in the middle? Because I keep looking at Checo, and me and Brian both love Checo, and I just think, if the car really is that much faster than everybody else, you are doing an amazing job of masking it.
I don't know. I mean, we're sort of like into Kovalainen Hamilton era teammate disparity, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's hard for me to say, because of Red Bull's particular history, the explanation could be any one of about a dozen different things, one of which is that, yeah, in this particular car with this particular set of characteristics, Perez is flailing right now. We saw that last season too. The car got to a certain point and he was flailing. It's happening again now. The disparity, like in qualifying,
yep,
especially is notable, and especially like in terms of the time gap between them. Like I think of, when I think of F1 teammates, if we were F1 teammates, and I would expect to be no more than 0.3 slower than you in quali, barring some other thing going wrong that I had no control over. And that's at the outside. When I see teammates that are particularly well matched, it's a 1/10.5 or less.
Right.
And then you would expect in the race a similar performance. If you have a car that you can easily win in, I should really be finishing second or third every race. And if I'm not, then you have to wonder, is there some difference to the car, or is there just some, I'll put it to you this way. I think a great example might have been Ricciardo at McLaren, where clearly it was something about that car had him chasing his own tail for lap time, and he could never get his head around it. Did that make him a terrible driver? No. Did that mean that he was any less slow before he went there? No. But in that particular car, they were unable to get him where he needed to be. So that's a plausible explanation, that the car works the way it works. The engineers know how to make the car super fast, and it just works absolutely contrary to the way that Perez likes to drive a car. And that, when the margins are tenths, hundredths of a percent, making those kinds of differences, that's all it really takes is, now I have to think about this thing that I normally never think about. And then you're half a second a lap slower.
It felt after he missed Q3, 5 times in a row or something like that, and Max had all poles, and they weren't all mechanical failures on Checo. Actually, I don't think any of them were. And then in Hungary, he was 9th with, he had a solid quali. Like nothing went wrong. He didn't have traffic. And Max is, up at the top end of quali. And so I think your point is a really good one. And I agree with Rob. Like after Hungary, I had to take a serious look at what was going on. I was just trying to ignore it. As a Checo fan, I'm like, nah, it's fine. It's just bad luck. Bad luck again. Bad luck again. Bad luck again. And, eventually it's like, wait, hang on a second. He actually didn't have bad luck and was 9th on the grid to start the race. And so, yeah, I don't know. Is looking down the grid a little, though, Matt.
Yeah.
Are there a particular set of teammates that really intrigue you? So is there a team where you think the teammates are pretty either evenly matched or maybe not as evenly matched, but it's exciting? Like what team has good team dynamics in your opinion? If you look up and down the grid, you say, I kind of like watching this team do their thing.
Well, that obviously will change. Right now, I find that the Norris-Piastri pairing to be very intriguing. Because for a rookie, Piastri's doing exceptionally well. And I think Norris has the better of him. But Piastri is a lot closer than I would have expected for his first season with this team and with a Mercedes power unit in the back. Because I think most of his previous practicing in cars had been with Renault or Alpine. So he's had to get used to a different power unit and its delivery as well. And the McLaren upgrade, I find is a refreshing contrast to what Mercedes did. They looked at it in November and said, we're not going to solve any of the problems we really want to solve. What did you get me production? Production's like, well, we can have this car for you, 3 weeks after preseason testing. Well, that's not going to work, is it? So we will suffer with with this incomplete project until we can bring the full car we wanted to, bring it to Silverstone or whatever. And they did, and it was just bang. Yeah. There it all the way was. And meanwhile, you have Aston, who looked so strong at the beginning, very much doing a Braun thing where like, oh, we're going to be really fast till our first update, and then we're not going to be so fast anymore. And that's been great for watching races because it's meant that there's real intrigue. You have any week you have a pool with McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, and potentially Aston, I suppose, in it. That might be the best of the rest, and you just genuinely don't know. It is in now finally to sort of reach back to your driver point. And drivers are completely irrelevant. Like, I mean, they might make a 2 or 3% difference tops in a car. You know, like a great driver in Formula One, good enough to be in Formula One, versus an okay driver. You're looking at 2 or 3 grid positions maximum. You put Hamilton in last year's 0-pod Mercedes. Was he getting poles in that because he's a genius driver? No, because the car was a disaster. And no, Max would have been equally terrible in it. The driver only has a little bit of influence relative to how well the designers of the car have done. And because it's because it's an open formula, you're always going to have that. The engineering, the aero, the power unit are going to be a huge chunk of performance. And only occasionally do you get into the margins where the drivers are making the difference. But when you do, oh, it's fantastic.
See, I think I appreciate your answer. I disagree a little bit, saying it's only 2 or 3 spots for the driver. I think they do contribute a bunch, and I think you can look at, for me, I love watching, like in this year, Albon drag the Williams around. And I'm not saying Logan's great or a great measuring stick per se, but the delta between them just feels, immense. And so sister team, if you put Max in, and I know we would never see this, but if you put him in Danny Rick's seat and it was Yuki and Max in the AlphaTauri, I feel like you would see a pretty significant difference between the two of them in the same car. I know you may disagree, but I just feels, and I'm not saying Max is going to win. Don't get me wrong. I'm not putting him on the podium in the AlphaTauri. I'm not crazy. But I think you would see, I mean, maybe, but at least on this point, I think it would be fascinating to watch the delta between them. I think it would be pretty serious. What Yuki could do, as he is now, finishing 11th, 12th, 13th on a good day. I think you would see Max sort of in the points at the back end.
Yeah, like an 8th or a 9th. Like I'm saying, we'd love to think that he'd win in an AlphaTauri.
No, we know that.
Unless it's just like pouring rain.
Yeah, no.
And aerodynamics don't matter at all. Every car does have 100%, and no driver, no matter how talented, is going beyond that. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if you look at the difference, Perez to Verstappen, half a second is huge in Formula One time.
Right.
I can't think of too many teammates that lasted a long time that weren't just like clear. I hate to use Latifi, but I'm trying to think of not like Karthik, like people were just really had
Mazepin
had just bought their way in and were hanging on. You just if you were technically in the window to be a Formula One driver, it's going to be amazing for you to be more than half a second slower than your teammate in qualifying. I mean, that's career ending very rapidly. If you're half a second, 3/4 of a second off your teammate, you're pretty much done by the end of that season.
Agreed.
And in terms of race, well, I mean, you can think, I mean, even look at Perez. As tragic as qualifying has been, how many spots behind Max is he? In
terms of the championship, or when he finishes the race?
No, just in terms of when he finishes the race. He's what,
not too far.
3.
And Hungary was a good example of that. He made his way up to 3rd.
Yeah, and so this is what I'm saying. Like unless you have someone severely, savagely unqualified to be in the sport, and barring mechanical mishaps or things that we don't hear about because no one's going to tell us Logan Sargent has like a mapping issue and so doesn't have full power. It's just like he's going to be way behind, and then they retire the car 3 laps from the end so he can get some practice. So barring stuff like that, if both drivers are on it and they're in the same car, same parts on it, which is often not the case.
True.
Then I 2-3 grid spots, maybe 4 if it's like wet and like that kind of indefinable je ne sais quoi can really make a difference. but it's hard for the drivers to make a huge difference because so much is limited by just simply the physics of the car.
Yeah, I agree. And just to go back to your point about when you started all of this about kind of, you touched on Piastri and looking at the teammates. They said on the commentary today in Quali that not only has he come in and made an amazing impact and quite, you can see why McLaren went to court for him because they wanted this talent. They said you've also got to layer in the fact that this youngster didn't even have a drive last year because he's been out of a car for a year. It's not like he's finished F2 at the end of last year and then come straight over into F1. He's a very, foundational step of his career. He sat out of a car for a year and then just come in and absolutely lit it up. I don't remember seeing. I might even have to go all the way back to Hamilton to remember a rookie coming in and kind of catching my attention like this. I'm getting old, I've probably forgotten things, but I really like Piastri.
Oh,
I really do.
Just wait till you get to be my age, friend. No,
no. I was going to say that he's absolutely impressed me. That was my point, and I can't wait to keep watching him. He's one of those drivers now that I can't wait to watch the next race to see what he does.
Yeah, I think that from my point of view, what I would bring up is I do believe he got a fair amount of historical Formula One car driving in his off season. That Renault or Alpine, I forget which one it was at the time, had sort of a preparatory program for him where he went to a lot of the tracks and drove some of their older cars, got coaching, access to telemetry, was in the simulator for them very regularly. Like they did have a plan for him, and that plan I think was Williams until Zach realized that they hadn't properly locked his contract down, and naturally wanted him because he was, everybody knew he was quite talented. That's why Alpine made such a fuss about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So who have you got down for finishing as best of the rest this season then, Matt? We give Red Bull the constructors. In fact, Max probably wins the constructors by himself, but who's coming in best of the rest as we head into the break? What's your thoughts?
I'm going to be very boring here and say from a constructor's point of view, it's going to be almost certainly Mercedes. Russell and Hamilton are fairly evenly matched.
Yep.
And they're continuing to score podiums and points. And McLaren, because of their choice, they had no choice, but because they were so far behind for the whole first part of this season, I think we'll find it quite difficult to catch up. Plus, we still have Mercedes bringing updates. We don't know where Mercedes, to me, is the big wild card here. So this is my Mercedes theory. And this is my general theory of what's happening with this entire regulation set right now. I think that where the magic is really happening is around the rear of the car, specifically with the rear suspension and what's happening underneath the side pods with how they're managing the floor and the flex of the floor. And McLaren, because they knew they wanted to do this, showed up with a chassis that had a rear suspension that would accommodate the concept they've now put onto the car. And so when I say concept, I don't know if you've ever paid any attention to the episodes that I've done with Summers over the years. It's an acquired taste, kind of like, I don't know, asparagus or whatever. And but he likes to talk about what he calls an aerodynamic handshake, that you have to connect the air all the way down the body of the car to the place you want it to go. And if anything goes wrong, then you lose performance. And a huge part of that, with this regulation set being focused so much on ground effect and Venturi tunnels, a huge amount of that is ride height and the ability to control ride height. And I think where Red Bull set themselves apart, and I think where McLaren have made a big step, and where I think Aston have too, is in understanding and getting the geometry of the rear suspension to work in harmony with the rest of their aerodynamic concept. And I think Mercedes, because they did show up, still committed to that zero pod concept. I think they find themselves frequently needing to make rear suspension adjustments they can't because of like where the gearbox is, where the engine mounting points are, where they've chosen to attach the wishbones in the rear. They can't change that without rehomologating or basically retesting the whole chassis, and that's too expensive. So I think we're looking at a Mercedes that to a varying degree is going to be a Franken car for the rest of the year. So they're a real wild card. At certain tracks, they could be very strong. At certain tracks, they could suddenly, unexpectedly be terrible. And they're not necessarily going to know ahead of time. But this new update with the side pods is very interesting because it confirms the direction that everybody else is going, which is to a downwash side pod and trying to create as much outwash as possible with the side pod, which has become sort of the, I've lost the word now. But it was what they were previously in the previous regulations. They were using to push the air outside because the wake from the front tire is what really ruins a lot of the aerodynamics behind.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, if you look at like the two different tales from the beginning of the season, right? So McLaren came out, like you said, there was a story that broke, I think, just before the season started when we had livery had just been revealed and everybody's going, "Oh, it's an amazing car. It looks so amazing." And the story broke of, yeah, we've kind of messed up our kind of basis of our whole design. So we're, you're not going to see much from us performance-wise at the beginning. And it was out there as a statement. But like you say, the concept then got baked into the car so that it could be brought to life later on in the season. Mercedes put all their eggs in that no side pod design and just feels like they've been square peg round holing it for the rest of the season now because everyone says, "Oh, look, they should have just gone and copy Red Bull." Yeah, it's just because you've seen it on a crane, hoisted up in the air, and had a look at the floor, doesn't mean you can go and 3D print it back at your in your shed and stick it on the bottom of the car. It's a lot more sensitive than that. My son, my eldest, is about to go to college, and he was talking to my daughter, who's only 12 of all things. They were trying to talk about aerodynamics on a car, and he explained it. She was like, I don't understand it. You can't see it. How can you see it?" So you can't see it. You just have to imagine that there's a whole bunch of little mini tornadoes that if you were trying to lock it down under a piece of wood, you'd be trying to guide where all those little tornadoes go. And she went, "Oh, okay. Okay, I'm not quite sure that works," but it's so ridiculously, I can't even get to the level of what you get to, Matt, in terms of like diving into the science behind all of this. But the people that just write it off as, "Oh yeah, New is designing a great car, they should all go and copy him." It's like every millimeter of every surface has got some kind of way of either being beneficial or derogatory to the way that air is going to flow across the surface. And that's why I can kind of see where you're going and probably agree with you on your point about the drivers probably contribute less and less and less because of they can only wring so much out of what the car is maximally going to be able to offer.
Yeah, and it is important to understand, and you are making this point correctly, that, yeah, we've seen teams literally copy other teams, and it never ends well because copying is one thing, understanding is another. And if you don't understand the concept, then you don't know how to develop the concept. And if you don't know how to develop the concept, you're going to be so far behind by the end of the season. And then if they change anything, which I can hold up both Haas and Aston's copy of the Mercedes as examples here. If they change anything at all, you're completely out to sea. There's nothing you can do about it. You're just hopelessly lost for ages till you get enough data for your engineers to figure it out on their own. This is why I thought it was terrible for them to copy the Mercedes. As far as India, they had a long history of understanding how they were running that car. And they were quite good at optimizing it for a very small amount of dollars relative to most other teams. And to chuck it out just because, now suddenly our owner, I'm convinced it was the owner, our owner thinks it's a great idea to just Xerox a Mercedes. Well, that's just, well, you see where that got them. That's all I'm going to say. You see exactly where that got them. You go back, look in time, see exactly how they did with that. And they were very fast till something changed. And then they were lost and blamed everybody but themselves for their poor choices.
Tracing Point was the greatest nickname I'd ever heard of that.
That was fantastic. Sorry. But it is like you could copy the Red Bull floor, but if the Red Bull floor doesn't work with the aerodynamic concept, you've just entirely, you've made your car worse than an AlphaTauri. And who wants that?
Ooh.
Shots fired. All right.
I'm sorry. I think you have to admit, Williams is better than AlphaTauri this year.
Yeah, with a Wish.com steering wheel with the monitors glued to the cockpit as opposed to the wheel. Anyway, Matt, that concept is important, but so is the idea of learning about people who come on the pod with us. And so the 100 Seconds of DRS is something we created to get an idea about, people and what they like about F1 and drivers and tracks and non-F1 things. And so you've been so kind with your time and agreed to run the 100 Seconds of DRS with us. Are you ready for this opportunity to beat Spanners?
Well, I'm clearly used to beating him at everything, but I think I have to say I'm looking forward to this opportunity.
Rob, would you like to do the questions or shall I?
No, it's your turn. I asked the question last time, so I'm all ready with my timer ready to go. So,
Matt, Rob will count us in, and I'll start with the 100 Seconds of DRS.
I love the fact you've not asked the question for so long you can't even remember what you're about to do. So I'm going to count you in, and we're going to hope for the best here, Matt, and see how we get on. So 100 Seconds of DRS in 3, 2, 1, begin.
First poster you had on your bedroom wall.
Farrah Fawcett.
Very nice. Best young driver in F1 today.
Piastri.
Best F1 driver on the grid currently.
Hamilton, Verstappen.
What's your favorite cheese?
Oh, that's a tough one. Parmesan.
Best racing movie of all time.
Ooh, Grand Prix driver. Rockford Files, baby. Jim Garner.
Most commonly visited website.
FIA.com.
Wow, excellent answer. Favorite TV show?
The Bear.
Favorite musician or musical group, Matt?
Well, there goes the 100 seconds. Maurice Andre.
Fill in the blank. F1 in America is...
popular.
If you could add a venue to F1 today, where would it be?
Road America.
Oh, nice. Okay, DRS, good or bad?
Both.
Okay, then here's another one. Tires, interesting or not?
Tires are everything. Without them, the car's going nowhere.
Yes, I love tires. Thank you. So if you could add a James Bond style gadget to an F1 car, what would it be?
Oh, I like the tire deflator. Definitely.
and that's it. That's time. That's the 100 seconds. I
had a couple more I wanted to get to. In particular,
you had a lot more, but
is it GIF?
You can't ask more. But see, Matt, unfortunately, you've got Brian who asks questions in slow motion. So we only get through about half the questions in the 100 seconds than if I was asking. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the Midwest in me. Although we got about through the same amount with Valtteri. It's just because I was asking slowly as well during that one. But anyway, Matt, that was awesome. Okay. That was awesome. I appreciate you doing that. And so your answer, for favorite musician. Who is that?
You don't even know who Maurice Andre is.
I don't.
Nobody will know who he is.
Well, I wanted to ask on that because you're obviously an incredibly talented musician. So who you selected is someone I don't know. So I'd love a little bit of background if that's okay.
All right. Well, he was, how shall we put it? He was the Michael Schumacher of the trumpet world when I was in high school and buying records to play on my record player. He was the guy. He was the man. French, you might have guessed by the name, and famous for playing the piccolo trumpet, which in trumpet terms is actually like about half of a regular trumpet. So it sounds about an octave higher. And it was invented because back in the time of Bach and people who wrote for trumpet back then, they didn't have trumpets with valves. That was an engineering invention yet to come. So in order to be able to play melodically, they actually made really big, long trumpets, and they played very high up where the notes are close enough together. You can play scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol in a row without needing valves. But that's also incredibly prone to error. So in the modern era with valves, someone just had the great idea, well, look, if we chop half the trumpet off, then the partials are farther apart in the range where all these parts are written, and the trumpet players will be more accurate. And oh my God, they need to be more accurate. They need all the help they can get. So he played the piccolo trumpet, but just as an artist, oh man, I hear that sound and hear him play stuff, and it's just like, yeah. One of the best ever.
That's amazing. Thank you for the background. That's someone we should all go check out and appreciate. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Just and I'll just dig into one question that you gave, because I saw Brian's eyes light up as well. The DRS. Okay, so I like the answer both, but I want to understand where they both came from. A rant I've been having on recent episodes is that I'm fed up of the
DRS
gimmies.
Trains?
No, not the DRS trains. DRS overtakes. I can't get excited by tracks where the DRS maybe is too long, and we don't see anybody almost bothering to overtake for the rest of the lap. They do the rest of the lap just trying to stay within a second, and they breeze past and nobody can defend it. I miss the days of classic defending, and especially like when Alonso could make his car 3 times as wide. And we saw it the other week when we had a wet race and there was no DRS. And I'm like, I want that. Now, I don't mind DRS where it works, where it gets you close enough to attack. I just don't like the almost gimme. It cheapens the overtake for me, and that's my rant. I'll get off my soapbox now.
No. I mean, do you remember when they used to tune the DRS?
When they used
to tune it. They used to change the length of it. They take the data and then they'd be like, make it longer. Anyway, to make it very simple, and this is an idea that I'm completely stealing from Matthew Summerfield, but he's not wrong about it. DRS is absolutely needed with this efficiency regulation side. You need it, or else you would just not have overtakes eventually. Where it falls down is in how it's being applied. It should be run like Indy's push to pass. You should get 2 minutes of DRS or 5 minutes or whatever they figure out the right amount is. And you should be allowed to employ it in any DRS zone at any time you want throughout the entirety of the race. You want to save them up to the end? Yeah, go for it, baby. You want to use them to get away from everybody at the beginning? Sure, good luck with that. Hope your defending skills are up to the task when everyone who saved theirs is running you down with a fresh set of soft tires. This is it. It needs to be made a tactical weapon in the hands of the driver. Why they don't do this, I don't know, because it's absolute genius, and it would make the racing exciting, and it would make DRS work the way it was originally intended to.
Agreed.
So that's why I said both, because I can see how it could work correctly in the sport. But I agree with you right now. They don't always get it right at a circuit, and when they don't, it absolutely kills a lot of the excitement.
We had a very similar, the push to pass, same thing. We had Molly from Tech Heads. I don't know if you listen to the Tech Heads podcast, Molly was on, and we kind of got into this whole DRS thing, and we arrived at the similar idea of like the push to pass was my example, but just how much time, button hits, whatever it may be, something that to deploy it strategically, which I know we're at time, but I would actually say I'd love more strategy. However they can put more strategy into F1, I'm maybe all alone on this, I feel like, but I'd love to see the tire choice come back into quali, where whatever you get into Q3 on, you have to use in the race, and start the race on, because it just makes teams think a little bit more about what they're doing in quali as opposed to just going around and using as many softs as they can afford. But anyway, sorry. I love more strategy. I love tires. I love more strategy. Don't get me started.
We don't have another hour to go, because
hour plus.
Hour plus. I mean, after listening to you, Matt, you two, I was worried this would turn into a complete tire fest and I wouldn't even get a look in. So I'm quite glad that we've come up to the hour and we've only just started talking about them, to be honest. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this, Matt. It's been absolutely brilliant. And now I kind of feel like I need to make the effort, only being a couple of hours up the road, to come down and try and get you playing a gig one night. So it's, like I say, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Happy to come back anytime and chat. It's been a blast.
Thanks, Matt.
Box.
Right, that was so cool. I loved it. Like we said right at the beginning, we spoke to him for a long time afterwards as well. And maybe I will get myself off my sorry backside and get myself down to NYC and check out a gig of his, because he actually got me going and Googling that I want to say piccolo. Piccolo's the right word, right? Have I messed that up? That was the type of trumpet that was his favorite trumpet
Correct,
player, right,
yeah.
Andre? Yeah.
I think that's right.
Yeah, loved it, and we will take him up on the offer of get him on again in the future.
Sounds brilliant. Matt, thanks for doing that. Everybody, thanks for listening. We can't wait to see you again in a week's time. Be well.